Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Senator Michael Moore and the WRTA Administrator Steve O'Neill. It promises to be an informative and lively session, and they're going to provide us with some overviews of the state of Massachusetts as well as the WRTA and its recent expansion into Grafton. Steve's going to have a lot of information about that.
Yes.
Michael will have a lot of information about the state situation. And to jump into it, the legislature recently passed a supplemental budget. That's a good sign, I believe. But can you provide us with some of the details of that supplemental budget, Steve, and also the overall financing health of the state at this point in time?
Sure. Well, right now, we're right in the middle of the budget process. The governor did the House 1 budget, which is now sitting in the House Ways and Means, waiting for them to release their budget. But prior to the governor's budget being released, we had Ways and Means every year has a consensus budget hearings where we have three of nonpartisan groups that come in, entities that come in and give us their projections on what the revenues are going to be, what the economic health is going to be of the Commonwealth. And as part of that is we have the administration coming in with what they expect the economic health to be. The predictions that we had for the upcoming fiscal year, which starts July 1st, was roughly ranged between 4% to I think 6.5% revenue growth. So right now, everyone is estimating, they're taking a conservative estimate about 4.9% revenue growth for next year, which equates to about $1 billion, $1.1 billion that we're looking at for new revenue for next year. Now, I think everyone remembers back in the early 90s, long before I was in office, when the voters passed a referendum reducing the income tax from 5.95 to 5%. Well, when the legislature passed that income tax reduction, they did it based on benchmarks. And the benchmarks is based on what the future revenue growth is going to be for the next fiscal year and what it's been for this fiscal year. And right now, we've met those benchmarks. By hitting the $1 billion benchmark, we've now met those plus 2 consecutive quarters. And we did this not last year, but the year before. Well, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but if we were raising taxes, people would be going crazy. But we reduced it 2 years ago from 5.3 to 5.25. Well, January 1st of this year, it was reduced from 5.25 to 5.2. So again, doesn't sound like a lot, but for the 6 months of this fiscal year, the remaining fiscal year, that's roughly about $57 million. So you put that for a full fiscal year next year, you're looking at a little over $100 million. So that's one of the offsets that we're going to see with the increase in the revenues coming in. So everything is moving in the right direction. You know, we've got a lot of budget line items that over the last 4 to 5 years have just been stagnant, actually been reduced and stagnant. And the only ones that we've really increased over the last 4 years that have seen substantial increases has been our Chapter 70 for our schools. Every year we've increased the funding.
Right.
Last year I think was 4.3 or 4.1 billion. This year the governor is looking at 4.4 billion, and I think the legislature will follow through with trying to maintain that and hopefully do a little better in the local aid, which he basically level funded. But the veterans line items also, that's when if you look at going back to when the recession first hit, every year that's one line item that we've consistently increased funding to. And based on going back to you were saying about the supplemental budget, we actually just passed the supplemental budget February 13th. It was roughly a $200 million supplemental budget, passed 37-0, so it was a unanimous bipartisan support. It includes $45 million to invest in shelter contracts for emergency assistance. I think if people have been following the media, that we've had this problem in Shrewsbury. We've had people, homeless people, that individuals, families who have lost their homes, that they've actually now been, the Commonwealth has been putting up in hotels. And Shrewsbury had I guess an unanticipated amount of people that
distortion to their budget
to
because of the movement of families. Yeah.
Yeah. So we appropriated $45 million to go and to try to relieve for the shelters. And one of the funds that receives a lot of money in this is the our mass rental voucher program, which if you go back to this was like when I'm talking about the line items that would, have been stagnant or going the other way. You go back to the mid-90s to late 90s. This line item was over $100 million, and right now we're at 57 million. So
And
now,
rents have not gone down.
No.
right. So we're trying to restore some of these fundings to help these people.
Right.
I shouldn't say people, help families. We also, with this, we appropriated $30 million to Mass Highway to cover snow and ice payments. We did $28 million to our 11 county sheriffs, who, and these are one of those budget items that you just can't predict what they're going to have for a caseload
Right.
coming
Right.
in and out of our county jails. We also did $17.4 million to cover costs of collective bargaining agreements. We did $16 million to cover the premiums associated with 3 communities joining the GIC. I think most people should remember, several years ago, we did a reform of municipal health care,
Right.
where we allowed the municipalities to join the state GIC,
Right.
which
Right.
they get some reduction. So this is actually to those communities to help for the reimbursement for them coming over. And this is actually a very important one, which I think your
Union.
organization would get some benefit from.
Yeah.
$15 million to the recapitalization of the Brownfields Redevelopment Fund. So that's redeveloping old mills, sites with contamination. And then we had $10 million that went to the human services salary line item. We had away $4.8 million to fund the Safe and Successful Youth Program, and that's school jobs, summer jobs for the youth. And then 2.8 to support increased capacity at a Department of Children and Families. But overall, I think if you look at the economic health of the Commonwealth, compared to most other states over the last 4 to 5 years, people may not realize it, but we've actually been doing very well here in Massachusetts. We've got the highest bond rating we've ever had. When you've had other states during this Great Recession, other states' bond ratings being in question, ours has actually increased. And that's not by us doing it, that's by the financial
Even the
rating.
federal bond rating went down.
Right, so
So-
these financial rating firms have increased our bond rating based on how we're handling the finances.
Right.
And we're in the top 5 in the country for our rainy day fund. We started off the recession, I think at 2.4 billion. We didn't spend it all at once. It was, I think, utilized wisely. And then right now we're at $1.4 billion back in our rainy day fund. And again, with the top 5 in the country. So I think if you look overall, Massachusetts is doing pretty well. And we made some good investments for this current budget that we're in. Our higher education, which is, I think both I chair that committee, we appropriated an additional $90 million for this budget that we're currently in, which allowed all our public colleges and universities to freeze tuition and fees for this current year, for this current school year. We hear so much in the paper about student loan debt and our students or people looking who may have lost jobs trying to get back in the workforce, being able to afford to go to school. Well, this is actually one big impact of that. This was one of the highest funding levels that they received in the last 10 to 15 years. And we were funding in our higher education, public higher education, we were at 38th in the country as far as state appropriations. With this, we're only brings us to 27th in the country. But we are in the top 5 over the last 2 years of the amount of increases going to higher education. So we're moving in the right direction. That's a goal that we're going to have again for our upcoming budget cycle is again trying to make that commitment to hold the tuition and fees again, which is important because that's what's going to feed our economy. That's going to feed the workforce.
Well, not only that, and that's what I was going to go to is the workforce now, because a lot of people are going back to get retrained for jobs, and I was wondering if, because so many people are still in this region as well as in the state, still looking for work, what's the legislature doing to assist people looking for work?
Well, one, we have the Workforce Advisory, Workforce Investment Board, which actually I'm very happy to say that the Senate President actually just appointed me to. And it's a 65-member commission that advises the governor as far as different new programs or ways to try to align state services for that. But what we've done in that is, when we did the higher education reform a year and a half ago,
Right.
we actually created an Office of Coordination, which takes the Secretariat of Economic Development and the Secretary of Housing, and, excuse me, Secretary of Workforce and Labor, and the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, and we created an Office of Coordination in the, and we also put the Higher Education Secretary together so that they can coordinate services, so that this way we work with the business community. It's not the higher education community telling the business community, look, this is what we're going to train employees at. It's this collaboration of 3 secretariats working with the business community, saying, we need employees with, we need a workforce with these types of skills, which is really what we're hearing from the business community, is that they've got the skills out, they've got the positions there,
But not the people to fill them
but
with
not
the
the people
skills.
with the skills they need. So, I mean, to have that gap is something that we really have to try to blow up. But the, you know, I think overall, if you look at where we're going, I think we've made a lot of headway. We're moving in the right direction.
Well, this might be a good time to segue to you, Steve.
Right.
And then I'll come back to you with some of the unemployment insurance impacts that you've
Okay, yeah.
started to introduce. But Steve, one of the things people need is, a lot of times, because of not having a job, they don't have the money for a car, they don't have the money for the insurance for the car, whatever, the cost of gasoline. Now, the WRTA has done something really long-term as well as short-term, important for the town of Grafton, namely to have bus routes here in the town. Going around talking to people, they've said, where are the stops? How much does it cost? What's the route? I don't know this.
Right,
I have my own car, and I just,
Right.
I'm retired, so every day is a Saturday. So, you know, I just, it's not something that registers with me,
Right.
other than I see the bus twirling around Grafton.
Right.
Can you enlighten us
Sure.
and talk about that maybe a little
Right.
bit?
I can. I just want to segue to some of what the senator was saying. First and foremost, we couldn't have done any of this without his support and his colleagues' support at the state legislature. And really, they paid a lot of time and attention to the RTAs of the Commonwealth. There's 15 of us in the Commonwealth, as well as the MBTA. They didn't forget about the RTAs with all the work that they were doing with the MBTAs. So that's allowed us to do some additional work and put some additional service. That A, and B, there's a heck of a town manager here in the town of Grafton that said, look, we want to have some new service. And he helped the WRTA set up some focus groups about a year ago that we went out on 2 or 3 different occasions to meet with folks and get their ideas. What do they want to see bus service out here? And if they do, what would they like to see? So basically what we landed on is we have some MBTA assessments that the town gets assessed that it isn't using. So we reminded the town manager of that. So look, let's use those assessments. So we're using those assessments. It's not costing the town anything. It's not costing the WRTA anything. So it's almost free money. In this world, you don't really get a lot of free money. But we've got it, and we focused on the information that came out of those focus groups and said, okay, where do we want to start this service? So what you see out there is a small service right now. It's at 7 different places, and I can go through those in a moment. But basically, there's no direct stops at this point. In other words, there isn't a, like you see in the urban centers, urban cores, or Worcester, as an example, stops at every corner. Instead, what you have is what we call as a flag waving system. And basically, that's what it is.
The flag.
And it just can't be anywhere. You got to be sensible about this. We don't want people in the middle of the road on a snowbank right now waving the bus down. We want to stop in a safe area for the pedestrian, the user, but also for the driver in the van service. That's out there right now. So our effort right now, and thank you very much for having me, is to get out and say this is what's available right now. Avail yourselves to this, and what we're going to be doing over the next month, and we're going to start next week if we don't have this big snowstorm that everyone's talking about, going out into neighborhood centers, going out to meet the people and saying, look, this is a service, this is how it works. But basically, it's a service that starts in the morning, and our goal was to get people, what we heard a lot about at the town hall was, hey, you know, we want to get to that MBTA commuter rail stop, but there are other stops in the town that we want to get to too. And we got some of those locations. We nailed 6 or 7 of those down. We start out in the morning.
Can you tell us
Yep.
some of them, please?
Yep, we can tell you right now. We start out, there's 7. We start out at New Village,
Okay.
and we go to Church
Hopefully
Street.
people know where these places
Right,
are. But
right. And I'm not a resident of
Yeah.
Grafton, so you guys are
Okay.
going to know a lot better than me. But we go from New Village to Church Street to Shaw's. Then we go to Fisherville Mill.
Shaw's.
Shaw's,
Oh, you mean up in Worcester?
right.
Okay, from Grafton. All
And then,
right.
and then Fisherville Mill, and then Grafton, we go to the Grafton Town Common, then Stop and Shop, and then to the MBTA station. And then we reverse
Now,
that. in
that's
the
the
afternoon.
7 o'clock, so if people are working in Boston, instead of paying the $4 to park and then
That's a good point. That's a good
pay,
point.
or driving in to pay the
Right.
parking fee in Boston, they can take the WRTA bus right up to North Grafton and hop on the train.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because so many times we deal with this in the city of Worcester as an example, where colleges or hospitals want to create these massive parking structures. And the debt on that for 20 years, 25 years, or 30 years could be anywhere from $10 million up to $25 million, depending on how many costs, what the cost per space is. And so we've always made the pitches. What are you doing that for? We can show you where people, and I'll give you an example in a minute. We can show you where people live within a quarter mile of our bus routes. Get on the bus, leave the car at home 1 to 2, 3 days a week. Take the bus, save
Especially
yourself
with
some
the
parking.
cost of gas.
But what are you doing with gas? What are you doing
Yeah.
with the air quality? And you know what? The other feature of that is you're healthy. You're walking. You're doing some walking. You're leaving your house, walking to the stop, getting on the bus, walking to your place where the bus leaves you off to work, and reversing that in the afternoon. So there's a nice health aspect to that as well, but and an improvement to air quality. So we start off at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the service ends about 6, almost 10 minutes to 7 at night. It's $1.50. It's cash. You bring it with you. You deposit it on the bus, on the van, and what we'll do at the end of the day is take that money and put it in a safe and pick it up, and we go back at it again the next day. So this is a service that's sponsored by the WRTA. The vans are provided by the WRTA. We come out from our headquarters in Worcester, come out here in the morning, start the service off in the morning, end it up in the afternoon. And as I said, it's going slow right now, but this is what we do. We know it's going to start off slow. We have to have.
Now, how do you
forums
know
like
it's going to
this.
start off slow? Have
Well,
you done
if
this in
people-
other communities?
Yeah, we did. A good example was about a year and a half ago, same thing. Southbridge wanted to increase service out there, and what the link in Southbridge was not only some of the folks in the community, led by the police chief and the town manager, but Quinsigamond Community College has a big profile out there.
Yep.
And this links up with education and getting the right people with the right skill sets to the jobs that are out there. And they said, what can you do for us? So we said, we can look at expanding the service. So we go through the center of town by the library. The librarian has wrapped her arms around this project to the point where she wanted a kiosk in her, which we can talk about later, a kiosk that tells when the bus is arriving, when it's approaching, to the point where we go right by some of the major employers into Quincy, and kids coming from Quincy and Worcester taking courses out there, or the reverse trip going from Southbridge into Worcester to take classes. Started out very, very slow. 1-2 riders a week. It's up over, I don't know, 100, 150 riders a week right now. It's grown considerably. And that was all primarily by
That's
word
good
of
to
mouth.
hear.
By word of mouth. Not Clark, but Quinsigamond did a great job helping us out. The librarian, the town did, the police chief did in the town. So now we're looking at expanding that service even more with the towns of Dudley, Webster, and Sturbridge.
Well, and that's been a key point for the Grafton Economic Development Council also. I know several members on it, and they've been talking about this.
Get some
and-
real good people out here. They value and they understand. They're really sharp people. They understand the connection between transportation and economic development, and that's a big jump for us.
And one thing we should say too is that since I've been in the legislature, one of the first issues Steve brought up was the way that the WRTA was funded.
Oh, boy.
You know, and this is actually important because, you know, right now when we're doing the budgets, we're trying to fund the budgets for next year. Well, up until we did the transportation bond bill last year, the RTAs were the reverse. They were backloaded. So we actually, with the funding that came available, we're actually able to put them on the same budgeting cycle as every other state agency, so that now there's better control of the budget. It's more efficient, and actually the utilization of the budget, and also say the reforms that they've implemented goes as far as the type of vehicles they're buying. They're buying more fuel efficient vehicles. So obviously that saves money in the operations. And what's the one that you took us all on a tour of?
All electric.
All electric vehicle. If you want to
Right.
describe it, I think
Sure.
that's a great.
For the first point, I want to just add on to what the senator was saying is that, we were funding in arrears, what they call funding in arrears, and basically what that meant when the senator and his colleagues started working on a budget for, say, July 2014. Our service was already done and paid for, but we didn't know what we were going to get until that budget, until it was actually done. So we could budget at $10 million and we'd get $9 million. We'd be $1 million in the hole. All gone away right now because of the good work that he's done, his colleagues in the House and the Senate. We have now forward funding, so we know what we're going to get, and it's up to us to live within the bounds of that budget. So it's going to be different for us, but we are going to make that work. So that's worked out well. Part of what we've been all about is let's not be the old RTA of the past. Things have changed, and what we wanted to do is look at not being dependent on any one fuel source. As everyone knows, they saw a price in gas 4 or 5 years ago went through the roof. Went up close to $4, up to $4 a gallon. And we use a lot of gas, we use a lot of diesel. And so what we said, okay, we're going to look at this a little bit differently. So we went ahead, we purchased half of our fleet right now is either diesel hybrid vehicles with batteries on the top,
Right.
or we have 6 all electric buses. And the miles per gallons that we're saving, since we started operating electric vehicles, I think we're up to almost $40,000 in fuel savings with the electric buses versus straight diesel.
Per bus or overall?
Overall. So, yeah, we've done an awful lot of incredible work in terms of trying to not reintroduce, but introduce new technology that's going to benefit the authority and allow us to put more service back out on the streets. And that's where we're at. We've been doing that in Worcester. We've been doing that in the towns. Northbridge, Grafton's one. Westboro, we're doing something very similar in there as well. So,
And I think another good thing that Steve and the WRTA is doing is that they're educating the public as far as what they're doing, but also, as he mentioned, that MBTA assessment, that communities don't realize that actually I would hear from a lot of communities that they're upset that we don't have to pay it, but they don't realize that, well, if you don't think you're utilizing the MBTA enough to be getting assessed that amount of money, well, you can use that money to pay for the bus service. So it can go, so.
We also, I remember from my past experiences with the board, we were able to petition, and they expanded the parking lot out here in North Grafton with that money too, which again, we were already paying,
right.
but getting no use of
That's
it.
right.
So
Yeah. What we try to do is make the senator's job easier by saying, the money's there, let's use what's there first before we ask anything more. So it took a little while to convince folks. We finally were able to convince Paxton.
Northbridge is looking at it now.
And Northbridge, well, those Paxton and Northbridge weren't members of the WRTA until a year ago. And it was our work knocking on the door saying, look, this money's sitting on the table, let's do something with it. And they decided that
So if it works here in Grafton, Northbridge will
absolutely, yep,
jump right
yep,
in too,
yep, right.
which would be nice for a couple of reasons. But
Right.
Senator, you were talking before about the state board and what the legislature is doing to assist people in getting jobs and unemployment insurance from employers, all of those different things that, as I read in the political section, if you will, of the Worcester Telegram, they have a recount of the week's actions.
Yeah.
That's something I've noticed in there. Could you?
Yeah. Well, what we've done is, well, first let's set the stage here. That over the last 20 years, all but 1 or 2 years, the legislature has frozen the increase in the unemployment rate. So obviously, the fact that we're doing that indicates that there's some change that has to be made. So this year, the Senate, we've already passed a piece of legislation to reform the unemployment rate increases or the unemployment insurance. The House, now we've sent something over to the House. The House has to act, and then it's got to go to conference. But we've frozen the rate, but not for 1 year. We've actually froze it for 4 years now. So it's been frozen for 4 years. We actually, and it's actually now, the proposal that we put forth is based on small businesses or businesses' utilization of the fund. So the less utilization of the system, then you will have a reduced fee. So the fee is going to range right now from $153 per employee to possibly $2,300 per employee. But that $2,300 per employee would obviously be the more extreme type case where someone who's actually is not, I guess, not prudent in the hiring practices. So in utilizing the fund, we've also expanded the rating table as far as the taxable wage to taxable wage now is going to be increased to $21,000 instead of $14,000. And we did was we froze the rate at Schedule E. And this freezing, which is going to take place for 2014, 15, 16, and 17, will save us approximately $21 million. Shouldn't save us, actually, it's going to save the business community approximately $21 million. So that's, I think this
Which is $21 million, hopefully they'll use to
420,
buy
$421.
more services or hire more people,
Well,
too.
or hopefully to hire more people, right? That goes
Right.
back in the economy. So
So it's-
$421 million for that. We also did, now this is an issue we have for some of these seasonal companies. The law had seasonal companies at being 16 weeks, if you employed someone for 16 weeks. Well, now we actually extended that to 20 weeks. So we actually gave them 4 additional weeks because we had a lot of complaints from some companies that the 16 week wasn't long enough. So we've increased that. So I mean, this is again hopefully something that we looked at. We've sent the minimum wage package over to the House. But with that, we wanted to make a commitment that we were going to try to do something for the business community so that we can try to reduce some of the regulation or some of the, I don't want to say excessive fees, but maybe some of the costs of doing business in Massachusetts.
I'm just looking through my notes here to see if we can get into more of what you're doing with the companies here in the Massachusetts economy, because we do have a lower unemployment rate than a lot of the rest of the country. But I think it's because of the positive actions that they're taking in the legislature. And go ahead.
You know, I definitely. We actually saw an uptick over the last, I think, year and a half. But you will also see with more people entering the workforce that may have been not calculated in before, trying to come back into the workforce. You will see a slight increase because more people are now hopefully taking advantage of the opportunities out there. And one thing too, we've actually made a strong investment in manufacturing, in advanced manufacturing, and contrary to what you'll hear on the street, that all manufacturing is going overseas to China or it's going over to the Middle East. Advanced manufacturing actually is one of our sectors that's growing, not just in Massachusetts, but nationally. But the problem we're having with it is that, again, where we go to the skills gap. So that's where we got to try to feed them with the workforce that's going to fill the need right now.
The educated workforce.
Right. And we've got a lot going on right now. Worcester, and I think people forget about this aspect too, is with investing in our higher education communities. Quinsigamond Community College, they're going to be, besides Southbridge, they're going to be opening up a branch in the old T&G building in Worcester, which is going to bring in roughly about 2,500 students into that area around City Hall. Now, people are going to say, well, how's that going to help the economy? Well, that's 2,500 students, so people, plus, and that's not counting teachers, professors, and other staff that are going to be now feeding the local shops, restaurants, other small businesses that are going to be operating in those areas.
And they
And
wouldn't have
also
done that
the-
without a viable transportation authority there as well. Right.
Yeah. So it's really all so interrelated.
This is a topic that Mike and I have talked about on a number of different occasions, and that's the intersection of Boston
Oh.
Road and 146. Can you give a little history on that, on some of the costs and where we're at now and how long the project's going to take?
Well, that was actually pending before I took office, and they want to put the overpass over Boston Road. I think if anyone has traveled that road during the peak hours,
Peaks.
I mean that Boston Road goes all the way back into, coming south, goes all the way back into Millbury to the West Main Street exit.
146.
146 goes
Yeah.
back into Millbury, and coming north,
Boston
the other way,
Road-
Boston Road goes.
It crowds in too.
Yeah, so the cost of the overpass has just grown. So So what we were able to do is, myself, Senator Richard Moore, former Representative Callahan, we actually convened a little meeting with Mass Highway. We had the former Lieutenant Governor. Actually, Governor Patrick came out.
I remember that.
I remember, he was late for that because of the traffic
Because
jam.
of the traffic. And it was scheduled right around this so they could see that. And so basically what, again, with the cost being so high for the overpass, basically what they're doing, we're adding a third lane on each side to hopefully try to alleviate some of the traffic that are getting off the highway. But the, let's see, it's going to be a third lane. They're also adding additional walls, 2 retaining walls. The work is expected to be completed. Oh, they have the utility lines. Try to get the date of the completion here, and
Sometime March of next year, or,
yeah,
I don't know,
yeah, I don't have a completion date yet for it.
that may be the curveball I've thrown you for today.
Yeah. But so they are, so it's basically going to handle a lot of the queuing problems that they have.
Yeah.
But so that should hopefully alleviate a lot of the traffic coming in. And again, this is again where transportation and investing in the transportation is so critical to the growing our economy. You've got some private developers with this parcels of land off of 146 that actually have wanted to make investments in there, but because of the traffic problems, they've held off. And so now we've got some private developers that are willing to come in there and are working with some of the local financial institutions that hopefully over the next year or two will be making some substantial investments, which means jobs.
Okay. Going to the transportation again, Steve,
Right.
going back to you. If specific groups in town, say the elderly, because they want to go up to Worcester to shop or go up to the mall in Millbury, the economic development people, interested people in the town of Grafton, if they wanted to have some kind of a forum to find out more, where would they go to get information relative to the new schedules, the new service that you're performing?
They don't have to go too far. They can go right to me. In fact, call me, or better yet, if I'll be looking up them. We'll be setting some meetings up, and we're going to be coming to them. So, like I said, over the next month, the reporter recently did a story on this service. Grafton and Northbridge wasn't being used much, and we knew that. And she, kept chiding me, "What are you going to do about it?" I said, "Well, we're going to watch it, and we're going to go out and knock on doors." So, over the next month, we'll be doing just that, and we'll stay at it as long as it takes. You know what? It may not work. We got to be able to face that too. But I think those that ask for the service, once we start talking to them again, saying, "Look, it's here, it's now. We need to get the word out, and word of mouth out more on this service." It'll grow. It'll start to grow. And we're not wedded to the routes that we have, the stops that we had. We can adjust these. If people want to talk about that, we can do that as well. One thing I do want to point out as well, we don't have them on the vans right now, but in all the fixed route buses that we have this new technology. We're ahead of the game in terms of keeping pace with the MBTA, but ahead of a lot of the RTAs in the Commonwealth in that. Using GPS technology, we can show the public where our bus is on a route. So there's no longer looking around the corner to see if my bus is coming down there. No, if you have a cell phone, if you have an iPhone and you're out at a stop, you can shine that phone on that stop, or you can get a text message on your phone, "Where's my bus?" And instantaneously, in a matter of seconds, it'll tell you it's 5 minutes away, 10 minutes away. And I got to tell you, like I mentioned, the librarian out in Southbridge, who took a real liking to this, to the point where she said, "I want to have a kiosk out here." So you walk in her front door, and you can see that bus schedule up, so that those people that are walking in and are waiting for the bus, they're going to know when to go outside. It's a nice feature to have. We don't think much of it, but those that are, if you're an elderly person, or you're a younger demographic, which we're really trying to go after, having a coffee and you don't want to go outside and you're on your iPad or your iPhone, you can check the website that we have and get that information. that stuff is going to be coming to the vans as well. So it's going to get better. And if we get so successful out here where it warrants a bus, you'll have that quicker than the vans. So something to look forward to. So grow the service, build upon it, add to it, and then we can add these other features as we go forward.
I think if you go to examples, if you look at the trains
Yeah.
at Union Station,
Oh,
were they first overcrowded? No, it took time to build up the ridership,
I-
and now we're
Expanding the
I can
ridership.
remember when the EIR, the Environmental Impact Report, was coming out, and there were folks in the city of Worcester, planning transportation folks in the city of Worcester saying, this is never going to fly. And it started out very slowly. I think we started out with 3 or 4 trains, and we went to 9, and we went to 12, and now we're up to 20. And the fact that someone had some real good foresight to renovate Union Station, number one, have trains, have Peter Pan and Greyhound right there, now the WRTA buses, anything with wheels on is right there in one-stop shopping. So what we've done now is align our schedules, these schedules that we're talking about in Grafton, in Northridge, in Paxton, in Westboro, align our schedules with the MBTA's schedules. So it makes it easy for our folks to use the whole system. So you can go at Union Station right now, get dropped off there in a cab, take a train to Boston, get a bus and go out to almost out to Springfield, or go to Peter Pan and Greyhound and go to New York City, all out of Worcester.
Just going to say, the only thing we don't have there right now are boats and planes.
Right.
Oh,
So-
I was going
And if we
move to that.
redo the canal, we can have boats.
to, well, yeah, we can do like Providence did and maybe make something out of
There
that.
you
But
go.
how about the Worcester Airport and JetBlue?
Oh, that's doing great. They had a conference last Monday, and I think the ridership is, 30,000
Right.
already for
Yeah,
for
they
JetBlue?
had
I mean, it's-
a chart in a recent edition of the Worcester Telegram,
Yeah.
and at 3 months it was going sky high.
Well, I remember back, again, not to date ourselves, I think it was the mid-'80s, when you had US Air there, and I want to say 250,000 people used to fly out of the airport.
That's right.
And it's only when we lost JetBlue, as US Air as the carrier, that the airport really went on the decline. So I think they stated we've got a good client base for the airport ridership to utilize the planes. It's now just marketing it and people to use it. I know right after the day after Christmas, I went down to Florida with my family to see my wife's family, and it was so nice to leave my house, drive literally 15, 20 minutes. You parked right across the street from the terminal, walked right there, and you were there. And even better, to come home at 11 o'clock at night, and you knew you had a 15-minute ride. The convenience of it was great.
It's good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So we are on the move.
We are.
Yeah, no, we are. I think there's a lot of positive things going on. It's sad that I think that too often all we hear is the negative things played out in the media, but or people talking. But there's so many positive things that are going on throughout local government, state government, and they all somehow intertwine, and which really what's been moving us forward.
Any other subjects you'd like to touch on right now, or?
Oh, good. Unless you.
Well,
Senator?
actually, the only thing I guess it was in the. Actually, I don't know if it was in the paper or not yet. I haven't read the paper yet today. But yesterday, the Senate did a water infrastructure bill.
Okay.
Oh, there's one.
Yeah,
You
we
just-
actually there was a special commission formed about a year ago, 2 years ago, and they went out and they went across the state and they were meeting with municipalities and different water treatment plants and different water suppliers on the needs in the the Water Resource
Waters,
Authority,
yeah.
MWRA, and we've got a lot of systems who the piping and the infrastructure is old. So we did a water and infrastructure and bond bill yesterday. We actually increased the cap on what we can spend from 88 million to 138 million, but it allows for communities now within the MWRA and outside of the MWRA system and regional entities to apply for 0 to 2% grants and additional funding opportunities for cities towns to reinvest in some of the water infrastructure.
It's interesting you bring that up because Grafton is now doing just that, looking to replace the older equipment, looking for bonding from the water district, not the water district, the sewer district, because the system's, 20 years old now?
Yeah.
And the technology has changed, the sewage piping, you have the breaks. So we're looking to modernize there too. So this is good news for us.
You know, and again, if you're looking at how it all ties into the economy,
Right,
if you want to attract small or large scale businesses or manufacturing, life sciences, biosciences, there's a lot of use of water. So if you want to, you need a lot of water capacity. So this hopefully will enhance communities' opportunities to expand their systems, and hopefully, which will attract companies to come into their communities, which will help expand their commercial tax base and provide people with the opportunity for good jobs.
yeah, as I said earlier, that's the really nice thing about our Economic Development Council here in town. They're working diligently to do just that, because the business community is not very large here. It's not a very large part of our tax base. But if we don't enhance the opportunity, then we don't have jobs here for people locally, and we could actually be driving business out by raising their costs. So
Yep.
all of these things are important, as you point out.
Yeah. So when people, you may hear people criticize the borrowing money or the bonding money. Again, we have one of the highest bond ratings in the country. So when the bond rating agencies are looking at what we're doing, there's obviously a lot of positive to
Well,
it.
and
But it's all going back into to resources that they need, that our communities need. It's taking a lot of the burden off of them.
And that happened very graphically here when we built the new high school.
Yeah.
We were able to go out a
Beautiful.
very
Beautiful school.
favorable
Beautiful.
bond rating,
Right.
and we right in the throes of the recession, so we saved money on the bid, and we were able to do things to enhance the project. It's been a great opportunity for the town
Mhm.
and for the kids in the town. So you're right; those things all come together. Well, let's wrap it up here. Thank you very much, Steve, for coming in.
Thanks
It's
for having
very
me.
much
Appreciate that.
appreciated.
Yeah, no, thank
Look,
you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Senator.
looking forward to community meetings in the future.
I'd love to
So-
come back in about 6 months saying, hey, we got the ridership up to XYZ now, and we're ready to take a next
maybe
step.
get you back here and have Tim come in a little bit of the Economic Development Council representatives and have another discussion just on that. But again, thank you, Michael.
My pleasure.
As
Thank you.
always.
Thank you for
and,
having me.
No, it's enjoyable. Good to see you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the townspeople.
Thank you.
See you again in a short time, hopefully.